looking at Alfheim, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but curious was what came first, the character design or the location of Alfheim, or both in tandem?
The upper left-hand corner image. That right there. Jung?
I did that one, actually.
You did that one?
Yeah.
That one right there was the one that spoke most to me, that said, like, I don't know what is about that, but the trees growing towards the central light source, like, we had a high concept for it, but that was the one that felt like, wow, the characters started there, the environment started there, like, that one really sort of presented. There was that one and another one where they were walking along the
And all the
beach.
pebbles. I was going to say, there's another one
so
that
those two, I think, were
similar.
done at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was back at Penn Station, I think.
Yeah.
Right, when you guys were in the balcony thing, and I was like, man, that's interesting. Those images told a story, which I thought, okay, how do we replicate that?
I think there's literally nothing we can move forward in this studio without having like an intense amount of story and meaning behind it. And one of the things too is I think there's so much like backstory to this place that doesn't fully come through, but when you kind of explain it to people, it's like, so that idea of like the living and like sort of the souls coming and living underneath the lake, and that this place is supposed to be sort of supplying all the souls to all the realms of everyone that's born, and so that idea of like a single point of light or life that everything grows towards, and that even the trench has this lindworm which was collecting all the souls and carrying them to the temple. Like that's the motif that's running down. So
oh, the lindworm makes me so sad. That was another cut from the game where it was basically this worm that would travel from realm to realm, and when somebody died would sort of eat the soul of them and kind of carry it off, so that part of them would go to either Valhalla or Helheim, and then they would carry this back to the lake and deposit it in the lake. And we had this whole interaction with the giant lindworm. It was gonna be amazing, and then sadly the evil word of scope made me cut it out.
And then Luke, your idea was like all those trees, because this one really stuck out early on too, I think, to everyone. But they're all growing towards that central.
Yeah, so the one thing that makes this realm kind of unique is that there's just that one light point.
Yeah.
So everything for thousands of years has been training itself towards it. But I think later on we needed a bit of a state change. So having the dark elves there sort of like tinting everything red. So when you finally crack open the hive, you get like the pure white light that's supposed to be there.
But I like how that even kind of like evolved it. And you look at like Q4, it's almost like these trees are growing horizontal and everything is like super fantastic but kind of beautiful at the same time.
Is this another one where it seems like it would be hard but it was easy?
I mean, this whole level, which I think is about 2-3 hours of gameplay, was almost a full 4-year build. I mean, this was the first level that was designed and concept and stuff. So this
for a long
this was
time.
complicated to build, a lot of intricate parts.
It's also the first level we sort of started to understand level design on. Like we went a lot of iterations. We couldn't figure out really the core gameplay loop, and this was kind of our petri dish to figure out what's going to really resonate.
And speaking of the mountain, let's chat more about it. I'm curious about how you guys made this seem like an imposing force in the background at all times, for a lot of the game.
Well, they drew a pretty cool mountain and we made it in 3D and put it in the background. That sounds simple, but it took a long time to draw a mountain.
The way you say it makes it seem like cool. Like a day later, we were done.
No, I mean this took
That's
probably over a year. I mean, there was lots of different treatments for what the top looked like, and so when you're at the bottom, we had to make sure that that was represented if you're looking up at it. So if you are paying attention in the game and you're down in the lake looking up at the top of the mountain, it has the same peak structure that is up there in the top. We tried to be pretty, realistic about that kind of thing.
We waited a while too. Like we were drawing or building individual sections to try to nail the feel of those things, but it really wasn't until we had to do the cover art that we said, man, we better make sure we know exactly what the mountain looks like from a distance, because we knew all the pieces and we kind of had a very blurrier vision kind of view from E3 2016. But it is funny how you'd think we would start with the wide shot and then move our way in, but we kind of went in the opposite direction.
Yeah, Timo really did an awesome job of making that mountain for the E3 2016 in the skybox, I think. And then Mark Caston, on one of the concept artists, for a while we were trying to add more symbolism to the mountain, so he was trying to like anthropomorphize it, maybe like adding like more of a motif of like a bear or wolf or some kind of more mythological thing, and it started to feel maybe too much like a animated film, like a Brother Bear or something like that. And so yeah, it really wasn't the pack front that was like, oh yeah, that's what we should make, and that's also what we're going to advertise the game with.
Of all the animated films you could pick, Brother Bear was your example. I like that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Fantastic. Deep cuts.
Yeah, so let's chat about Niflheim as well. Curious about challenges. I know this is very different from what's in the final game, so just curious how it all came to be, you know?
Yeah, these were some really early concepts, and these kind of tapped into, I think, when we were first doing Midgard and even like the high-vis for the game, there was this idea of like these mazes that were made. And so I think, who made that fog maze?
I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first prototype idea, we had some new fog tech and some new particle tech and started to play around making a maze that was very foggy but allowed the silhouette of all the objects to really stand out. And that would play into the mystery, and then we started to layer on a lot of lore with it, and then that there were these plants within the maze, and they were poisonous, and they were the ones that are kind of emanating all the poison, and you can, you know, go around them and get protection from them and everything. So just all layered upon layered to build this unique world. I do really like a lot of the architecture stuff you guys had here that we never really did in the end, but
I mean, there still is sort of some aspects of it, I think, but and that like greenish kind of mustardy feel. So
yeah, I think that core concept for me from a design perspective that really started to make it work was when we had talked about it essentially being a world that is filled with a curse, and when you enter into the curse you start getting damaged and hurt. So when you go there early, you're not able to be protected against that. And it is kind of that feeling of like, all right, I got to kind of armor up and I got to get the right sort of equipment to be able to survive the curse for long enough to be able to go explore this world, which I think that's kind of a cool confluence of things. It's like those early, it's like Wind Waker, when you got to go get the lead boots to go in the cave with the wind, right? And I love that kind of marriage of the mechanics and the things that you get, sort of being able to combat nature, right? So the hero versus environment.
Can you chat a little bit about concept-wise, especially with the coloring? I think, you know, how did the colors stand out, especially with all the realms?
The interpretations of Jotunheim in sort of popular entertainment right now kind of have the classic interpretations of the mountains and the blue and gray stone with the snow cap, very Lord of the Rings, right? But there is a reference in the Eddas that talks about the glittering golden fields of Jotunheim, right? And it's the only reference to that. Most of it still supports this concept of giants living inside of a mountain, which I still like the idea of the interior of the mountain stuff, but I was like, all right, well, I'm going to try to find as many of these sort of obscure references that still give us an anchor in the myth. And I really liked the idea of kind of leaning into that and saying, let's look at this in a slightly different way, right? Let's have a Jotunheim that feels like our own one, instead of saying, oh, well, Gandalf could be right around the corner, right? Going with Frodo up the mountain kind of thing. We don't really want that association. We need it to feel like our own. And there's this whole story about the giants and kind of them feeling almost like refugees of, in the myth, they retreat to Jotunheim and they kind of lock it out and prevent anybody from getting in because Thor and the hammer were super powerful and Odin was kind of a dick. So I think, you know, those things sort of started everybody drawing on these things, but yeah, it went a long time, I think, trying to figure this out and try to make it work. And even in the playtests, we had people going like, this was it? Like when it was early and it was like really like the roughest geometry that we had gotten back. Really not a great looking thing and a really crude lighting pass. People finished the game, right? So it was playtest like last year, early 2017. And they're like, I finished the game and I get to the desert in, you know, in New Mexico or something like that. And they're like, this sucks. They're very disappointed because it wasn't a lot there. But as everything started to come together, as the art went in, as all the lighting came in, all the effects and everything, people started to really understand that it wasn't that it actually felt like this fantastic, unique ending to their journey.
And I think some of the design, Luke, too, ties into the earlier giant piece where it's the stonemason and you guys did their masters of stonework. So this whole environment was kind of pulled from the carvings and the statues and all that stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of the, I think, larger architecture in Midgard was made by the giants, and then they we tell the story of their exodus to Jotunheim in the mural, that's in this space.
Yeah, it does feel like you're, spoilers, you're walking through like a cool museum, like when you walk in there, you're sort of feel small. You see all these cool sculptures, you're walking by, you get to interact with things and hear stories about what's going on, which to me, I think is really interesting, that it's like environmental storytelling, perhaps a little heavy-handed on it, but like in a neat way, like in a way that I haven't seen too many games do.
Helheim looks colder than Midgard. Curious what artistic touches in-game artistically you guys added to this to make it seem...
I think it's worth noting that the Jotunheim was very yellow. Midgard is very bluish, grayish, Norse, typical Norse, and this is green. We did come up with a big color script, so like Luke and Corey and a couple of us, we review the game plays in this order, and here's the colors you'll hit. So we don't have 3 green levels in a row, or 2 red ones in a row. And so Helheim just naturally slotted into this green thing. It being cold, it just sort of like fit the bill that we'd go sort of greenish, really foggy, kind of cold. Even the final like lighting color correction we did is sort of washed out a little bit, so you get that almost cold desert feel to it. Yeah, but green is the sort of from the get-go, like the visual target for this.
It was neat too, because I think we had a bunch of different drawings and somebody just tried one tinted green, and I was like, well, that's really interesting, because it's very hard to say you're going to the world of hell, basically, within the Norse realm, and obviously their hell is very different from sort of the Greek perception of hell, which then sort of gave way to the Christian perception of hell, as well as this fire and brimstone, right? When you're living up in that climate, hell is actually freezing, right, to death, right? So this idea of making a place that is unrelentingly cold, but also making it feel different from Midgard, which is also pretty damn cold.
Yeah.
And different from Hades in the previous games, which was like black rock and red lava.
Right, yeah.
And so like we came up with the idea to like have this sheared shape type look, where you'd have a normal shape and look like someone just kind of cut through it and then offset it a little bit. So it's just not visually pleasing, just looks kind of nightmarish. That was kind of the goal.
Yeah, and then playing up, like, using some aspects of the mythology of, like, the river of knives that you're crossing over, or the bridge, sort of walk into hell, and the idea of walking through mist for, like, 7 days to get to hell, and so kind of bringing all those aspects in. And then the gold.
Yeah, like in the myth, it's like the gold roof, but it's like anything we could do to connect with the myth, but also put our own sort of stamp on it, so it felt unique. I thought that was great. Like, it still maintained this feeling of being part of that world. It's nice that we have the picture of the eagle, too, the infamous eagle. The eagle that was part of the early pitches, was cut multiple times, brought back in, caused a lot of unrest amongst members of the team and the production staff.
Can you imagine if it wasn't there, though?
I cannot, no. I definitely think that the saga of the eagle is a story in and of itself. Honestly, it would make this fantastic sort of narrative journey when you understand how long and hard we fought for it and what it ended up being. Honestly, it's in there, and it's like, it's not a big boss or anything like that. Even when we got it back in, there was the point where people in the playtest were going, it's kind of a bummer that I didn't get to fight that awesome giant eagle, and we were like, oh man.
Just wait.
After all the work to get it in, now we got to make it not so visible so it doesn't feel like it dwarfs the guy that you're actually interacting with.
We're just always trying to find ways to combine those two things, characters and environments, and tell the story. I think the eagle is a big part of just even telling the wind blowing and kind of washing out the souls as they walk through the bridge. Like, that's a cool kind of combo with environment and characters that we try to do it everywhere.
Yeah, I think like that's a really good part of this game, which we've touched on in previous games, but I think we're really starting to understand a good methodology of working and how to integrate that, is feeling like characters and the world are fused together, so that sometimes the characters are not necessarily AI that you're going to interact with. They're a part of the world. They're the storytelling, the environment. The Witch of the Woods house, right? It's just this awesome confluence of all you guys getting together in a room and trying to come up with a clever idea. And then the one that was like, that's insane, we can't do that. And it was like, well, that's the one we're going to do that.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, it's just great. Like, I think that is one of the best parts of working on these games.